There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Hello and welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I am Dennis Carlson, founder of Agency Leverage and host of the #Partnerships series on B2B Growth. I am joined today by Kent Ragen. Kent leads business development as the VP of Channels and Alliances at DemandBase. Kent, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dennis.
I'm glad you're here. I'm eager to talk about this topic today. We talk on this show sometimes about category creation in and of itself as its own series on B2B growth. But on this series, on the partnership series, we really want to talk about category creation and building category via strategic partnerships. And Ken, I know you have some thoughts and ideas around this, specifically as it relates to account-based marketing. And I'd love to hear, before we dive into our topic today, love to hear a little bit more about who you are, what you do at DemandBase exactly, and what DemandBase does and how it fits into not just the ABM ecosystem, but overall in the marketing and sales stack.
Sure. So I've been in the MarTech space for about 20 years, really since email became a marketing tactic, and have been in a variety of customer-facing roles, 3 of those being running business development or partnerships in different forms. Most recently joined DemandBase about 3.5 years ago. And at the time, DemandBase was growing up with the ABM category. And I think at the time, it was probably fair to say that it wasn't really yet officially a category. I think that happened with Forrester's report that came out about ABM platforms last year, put DemandBase kind of at the upper right, if you will, which I think is a fair representation within this really rapidly growing category that's got a variety of different approaches to ABM. It's got a lot of different software SaaS companies that are providing different solutions to the ABM marketer. DemandBase takes a position where we talk about ourselves as being the only full funnel ABM platform where you can create your target account list with the DemandBase capabilities and then activate that audience or the set of audiences across sort of full funnel from offsite advertising to on-site personalization down to delivering sales insights to the salespeople about those target accounts.
That's really interesting. So when we talk about DemandBase, and as somebody like myself who is I consider myself pretty knowledgeable in ABM, but DemandBase is clearly a very ABM centric tool and platform, and really is kind of, from what you're saying, at the center of this category.
Well, I think so. And obviously I'm a little bit biased, but
sure.
What makes ABM tick or what got ABM off the ground as a pre-category and now category is the ability to identify anonymous behaviors and associate those behaviors with the actual company from the employees that are actually doing or exhibiting those behaviors. So whether it's on a client site, being able to understand of all of the traffic, typically if you've got 100 visitors to your website in a given period of time, only 1, 2, maximum 3% of those is going to actually raise their hand and say, "This is who I am. Here's my email address. I want to speak with someone. I want to be marketed to." The other 98% is going to remain anonymous. And similarly, as those individuals are not on your site, but rather moving around the web, they're by definition anonymous. So what DemandBase developed and actually patented originally was this ability to look at an IP address and then associate with that the company that individual was coming from. And things have evolved a lot over the past several years now. There's much more, not just IP resolution, but also cookie resolution. There's a lot of AI that's brought to bear to more accurately and at a more granular level be able to identify an individual, whether they be on, again, the client site or somewhere moving around the B2B web, and understand who that individual is in terms of what company they work for, and now actually be able to associate intent or behaviors that individual is exhibiting that might be relevant to us as a seller of products and services.
Yeah, which it makes a lot of sense that that information to any marketer would be extremely useful. But then when we look at ABM, I mean, I think of ABM almost as a philosophical change in the way that marketing and sales are done compared to what we had maybe even five years ago. I mean, you said ABM kind of, I guess, became a true category and just in the last 12 and 24 months, would you say?
I think so. And I think that's kind of and there's plenty of early adopters, right? There's probably,
Sure.
Certainly many hundreds, if not thousands of organizations that started doing different types of target account marketing. They might have even called it ABM from decades ago. But what we talk about when we say ABM has just sort of become an approach or a strategy that B2B marketers have adopted over the past several years and just become a category over the past, say, 12 or 18 months, what we're really referring to is the fact that those older tactics, which were mainly manual, and maybe a company would say there are 10 key accounts that we have to put a huge amount of effort into. We have to build profiles about each one, know every individual, and really surround those 10 companies with our messaging. Now what we're able to do with what I talked about before, this ability to resolve an anonymous user and understand what company they're from and what interests they're exhibiting, we're now able to do that with technology at scale. And that's why we talk about, again, ABM or the modern day technology-enabled version of ABM probably started, 5-6 years ago and has begun to go mainstream, I think, over, say, the past 12 to 18 months.
Right. And I've seen the same thing, and I've seen it popping up. I mean, I even have it on my LinkedIn profile that I'm ABM certified because it actually is starting to mean something to people. So when we talk about this young category of account-based marketing, I want to talk to you specifically about how DemandBase approached building that category via partnerships. That's your specialty, right? And if we think about selling an ABM centric software to businesses, to marketers who have decided to embrace this methodology of sales and marketing, certainly we can go to each individual organization and try to get them on board and try to get them to understand what this whole ABM thing is and why sales and marketing should be aligned and all these added values of doing marketing in this way. But I know DemandBase took another approach by having somebody like you look at this from a broader perspective and via partnerships. And I'd love for you to talk about how that kind of started and how this category has emerged and become ingrained via strategic partnerships and channels and alliances.
You bet. So in the early days of both ABM and DemandBase's approach to it, and then the way we thought about partners and the role that partners play in the growth of an emergence of the category, really started out with education. And if you look at, or if you experienced our go-to-market 3, 4, 5 years ago, we were out there with really kind of a thought leadership first approach. And you mentioned ABM certification. We've actually built 3 different levels of ABM certification that we deliver in market. We deliver it in North America. We deliver it in EMEA. We typically don't charge for it. We don't make any mention of demand-based solutions or capabilities within the ABM certification. It's really about the theory and how to put theory into practice, but not specific to any one technology or capability. So that was kind of our initial approach, was to make sure that organizations had a common understanding of what ABM is, the challenges that are presented by ABM. And then more recently, our go-to-market has been what I think more so than anything else, I should go back and say, we did extend that sort of education first approach to partners. So as we built up both our technology partnerships and even more so our agency and service provider partnerships, we led each one of those with kind of an educate first approach. So when we bring on a partner, this was true 3 years ago and it's still true today, the first thing that we both expect and actually demand of our partners is that they get ABM certified. So having that common foundational understanding is really important. Now, sort of fast forward from those earlier days to where we have been over the past, say, 12 to 24 months, DemandBase as an organization has taken a primarily direct selling approach to the market. And I think it's true when you look across the ABM category in general. There has been a fair amount of hype, a fair amount of rapidly growing awareness that was certainly magnified by the Forrester report that came out last year, and a growing number of ISVs and vendors that are talking about ABM on an ongoing basis. And so what we're seeing is that there's a ready market to engage in sales cycles with selling organizations like DemandBases, and then of course there's several other providers out in the marketplace. Now, what I've seen happen as adoption has gone from, call it, early adopter phase, and we've sort of graduated into more of a mainstream phase of the market over the past probably 12 months, is that we start to see some problems emerge, right? The days of salesperson finds account is ready to talk. There's a problem identified or a challenge. There's a solution to that challenge. The software is procured, and everyone should be moving in a positive, happy direction. But oftentimes that's not the case. And what I'm seeing as the biz dev guy is that there are a couple kind of major themes to where companies are struggling in this emerging category of ABM. And their roles, I think, for partnerships and different categories of partnerships to really help to mitigate those challenges and help clients to reach the end goal that they had in mind when they first procured the solution. In the technology world, I think the most pronounced challenge that B2B marketers, certainly ABM marketers, but I think B2B marketers in general are facing is an exploding MarTech stack, right? It's not a question of, do I have 5 or 6 or 8 solutions in my MarTech stack? It's, do I have 20? Do I have more or less than 20? I mean, it's really gotten to that point now. And so the challenge that comes directly from that is, in order for all of the different pieces to fit together and work together and actually deliver not just optimal outcomes, but outcomes that can be measured so that they can be optimized, requires that the data flow between systems, and that the data that's acquired in one system, be it an unknown or anonymous user converting into a known contact, be it intent data that's tied to an account or tied to a contact in one system, those pieces of data need to flow both upstream and downstream so that the entire stack is able to take advantage of that knowledge and have coordinated, orchestrated programs across the stack. Well, not surprisingly, in the state we're in right now, in the ABM world, those integrations, that data interoperability has been somewhat of an afterthought. That's an area where I see not just DemandBase, but others in the ABM industry really investing in partnerships, in tight integrations to deliver on the promise of these broad and deep tech stacks that the B2B marketer has been acquiring over the past few years.
And I'm curious, how much are you seeing tech and software companies with competing features, but that are soundly in, let's say, the ABM space, willing to align and do partnerships with a company like DemandBase, or just in the ecosystem in general, in that whole category? Do you feel like it's because it's still such a young category that people are, everyone's still fighting for, who's kind of, who's the category leader, who does this component really well, where are partnerships actually necessary? How are you seeing that kind of come together? It seems like in a more mature ecosystem that those things become a little bit easier. Or am I off there?
No, I don't think you're off. I think we're at an interesting phase of the evolution and I think you're right. Typically, in the earlier phases, there's more, the competitive juices are flowing a little stronger. The advantages that can accrue to building moats and so forth, and defensive postures tend to have more value than when a category gets more mature, and having an open ecosystem begins to make a lot more sense for the ISVs themselves. I can't speak to where others are within the ABM ecosystem. What I can speak to is DemandBase's position, and that is, and it may be biased by the fact that we are, at least by our assessment, in a leadership position, but we're very much aware of the advantages to an open ecosystem where an audience that's created within the DemandBase platform that has a target account list associated with it, and it's got intent data associated with those accounts and so forth, enabling that to flow into other systems, be it a CMS or a targeting solution, to take advantage of the intent data and deliver not just a firmographically relevant experience to a website visitor, but also an intent contextually relevant experience from an intent perspective, has huge value. And there's so many different ISVs in the ABM world that are emerging almost every day that need to ingest that kind of data, because they're not creating their own target account list. There's one target account list that an ABM marketer, or I should say, there's sort of a system of record for the target account list. And there could be many of them. There could be one that focuses on accounts renewing in EMEA over the next 3 months, and another one, net new prospects in the FinServ industry in North America. There can be any number of different audiences, but the audience needs to be consistent, and the data associated with that audience needs to be consistent and leveraged across the stack, not just within the DemandBase platform, but in the CMS, in the targeting system, in whatever other type, in your chatbot capability by a company like Drift, downstream in the kind of data that you're providing in terms of sales insights to your sales team. So all across the funnel, the data needs to be consistent. And so for us, it's absolutely a requirement that for the ABM marketer, who again is making significant investments across their stack, to be able to take advantage of those and then measure those. And I've sort of skipped over the measurement piece a little bit, but we've made a big investment in being able to connect what you're doing from an ABM perspective into your CRM solution, so that you're able to truly measure from a pipeline created, from a closed won and dollars won, and be able to roll that back upstream and associate that performance with each of your different audiences, so you can truly measure the ROI of your ABM programs. That level of data interchange is an absolute requirement for that ABM marketer, if not today, certainly tomorrow. So if they're not already, I would expect that really anyone who is a platform in the ABM world will move quickly in the direction of an open ecosystem.
Yeah, which makes the most sense and makes it way easier on marketers. When you look at the future, not just of this category, but because certainly there's many software platforms that marketers are using that aren't ABM specific and certainly may never be ABM specific, but are still really useful. Do you see a future where there are only more and more software options within that stack and more requirements that based on use cases that stack isn't actually going to shrink down and consolidate, that it's actually going to get bigger, but the interoperability will also increase? Where do you see that going?
I certainly don't have a crystal ball that's any more reliable than the next person, but my belief is that we will see consolidation across the stack. I expect that in a few years, certainly the CRM layer, if you will continue to be an ultra important layer.
Sure.
I think, however, within the marketing world, so marketing automation, ABM platforms, some of the more ABM tuned personalization capabilities, to me, that likely lives within one layer of the stack. So I expect to see a fair amount of consolidation there so that there's sort of a singular marketing system of record rather than both marketing automation and ABM and potentially something in addition to that.
Yeah, I guess I wonder about that. You brought up Drift, which I think is a great example of a company that kind of all of a sudden came on the scene doing something that's been around. I mean, chatbots have been around for a long time in the world of tech software, right? But they've totally changed that game and created, a category they call, it was conversational marketing, I think is their category, right? And they're a great option for an ABM practitioner. They're a great solution and fit in. And I sometimes wonder, will we just be seeing more of these kind of siloed, feature-rich options that are really accomplishing a great task and doing it really well, that then maintains the same sensibility as kind of the whole marketing playbook, in this case, ABM being that playbook. And if we'll see more and more of those pieces, and I know, none of us have a crystal ball, but I think it's pretty exciting to see people building specific types of software to do one job really, really well. And we all know Drift will do a lot more than just the chatbots, and already are kind of working on those things. But it's interesting to see that, and then how it plugs into something like DemandBase and how that layers on top of Salesforce. And from what I've seen, it feels like there's been a move, at least conversationally, anecdotally, away from talking about trying to have less and less technology to accomplish the same tasks, and more to, hey, let's get the best tool for the job.
Well, it's curious, and I certainly share your enthusiasm and your fascination with the sort of growing and super dynamic ISV ecosystem. What you noted there is interesting, actually, from a service provider perspective. Also, what I hear, and we've talked a lot about the technology world over the last few minutes. We also work really closely with a large number of agencies, and increasingly with systems integrators and with consulting firms. And one of the areas that we consistently hear, especially from the consulting and systems integration firms, is that clients are calling them in first and foremost to do a MarTech stack assessment, and ideally sort of an optimization and consolidation of that stack. Now, this is fairly new news, so I can't say definitively that stacks are shrinking. It may be that the outcome of those projects will ultimately be, actually, to optimize, you'll need more, not less. But there's certainly a sensitivity, I think, at the CMO level to their rapidly growing stacks, and a belief that less could be more, at least in the near term.
Right. Which actually, it might be exact opposite of what I was saying, but actually makes a lot of sense in this idea that if you have a few tools that do what you want them to really, really well, maybe you don't need a lot of these other tools. Maybe you don't need as many tools in your toolbox if you have, especially, I mean, that's part of the philosophy of ABM, right? I mean, is you're doing something really targeted, so you want really precise tools for those jobs. This isn't going out as wide as possible and having everything for everyone. This is a focus on a unique set of individuals.
That's right.
And accounts. So, well, this has been really interesting. Do you have anything you'd like to leave us with in terms of where you think you see the category going, where you think you see your biggest growth opportunities in strategic partnerships, or anything kind of related to that, Kent?
Yeah, I touched for a moment on the service provider ecosystem, and as much as we've talked about the technology ecosystem, I'm equally excited about what we are seeing within the service provider world, similar to the way the CMO has purchased ABM solutions and many other parts of the stack, and is now trying to figure out how to enable them to interoperate. In a similar way, a lot of CMOs have chosen to move towards an ABM approach and have made ABM investments in their technical architecture, but are now realizing that they may not have all of the internal talent, all of the resources, maybe the strategy and plan in place to actually take full advantage of that. And so we're seeing a really rapidly growing service provider ecosystem, providing everything from really tactical resource enhancement services through to high level, set the strategy, figure out the 24-month plan that's going to enable client X to move from a traditional demand gen stance to a true ABM stance. There's lots of really exciting things happening, as well as service providers that are developing sort of solutions around specific technologies. So they'll take their expertise, let's say in creative development and optimization, and they'll pair that with a demand-based capability that leverages intent around audiences and things like that. And they'll create a unique solution that they take to market that pairs or marries their service with demand-based technology. So that's another really interesting and exciting trend that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I don't know if one of the groups you're referring to is Intelligent Demand, but I've gotten to know those guys a little bit, and I think I actually found you through John Common over there, who will give a little shout out to. But I know that they've done a lot as a consulting firm around the whole ABM ecosystem and kind of either trying to make good better with companies that are already doing it, or introducing it and piloting some programs to get it off the ground.
Yeah, Intelligent Demand is a perfect example of what I was referring to there, and you see them been doing demand gen and sort of revenue optimization for years, and absolutely world class in those areas, and are seeing the opportunity that sits within this growing ABM category to help CMOs really, again, get the most out of these investments that they're making. And so they're right at the forefront of that trend.
Yeah. Well, Ken, I'm going to leave it there. I think this is a really interesting conversation that could continue for a while. But if people want more information on DemandBase or want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Email is always a good way. I'm Ragen, like the auto parts store, Ragen@demandbase.com. Would love to hear from anyone out there. And of course, our website's got just about all the info known to man about ABM, but would love to speak with anyone directly if there's interest.
Great. Well, thanks for taking time with me today, Kent. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dennis. I enjoyed it.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.